The United Nations calls for reparations to remedy the historical wrongs of trafficking enslaved Africans. This development happened around 26th of March 2026. So the United Nations is calling for reparations as a way to remedy the historical wrongs done not to the white slaves, not to the millions of slaves all around the world, because of course slavery happened to every single place on earth, but only to remedy the historical wrongs done to only African slaves. And the people paying are not going to be the Arabs, even though the enslavement of Africans is seriously still going on in the Arab world as I speak to you right now. There is something called the kafala system that is deeply enshrined in the Arab world, okay? A perfectly legal framework where black people are being trafficked to the Arab world to be turned into domestic slaves. Many of these Africans end up getting killed by their domestic masters or by their masters' children. Some of you must have seen the videos of some of these African domestic workers in the Arab world jumping from the balcony of these tall skyscrapers and falling to their death. Some of them get branded with hot irons, pressing irons on their body. Many of them are subjected to the worst kind of torture you can ever imagine. They go to the Arab world in search of greener pastures, but what they get is a life of horrific servitude and slavery. I'm not saying this happened in the past. No. I'm saying this is going on right now as I'm talking to you in the Middle East, okay? In Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, Kuwait, Lebanon, you name them. Iran, Iraq, you name them. Currently in Libya, Africans are being sold in slave markets. They are being kept in cages. The videos are so freaking gory that if I were to be showing them right here in this video, this will immediately get this video demonetized. But despite all of this, the Arabs are not the people paying for these reparations. The people paying are, of course, you guessed it right. Yeah, the white countries, the Western world. Let's talk about this.
The UN wants reparations, but for only one slice of history. So yesterday, the UN had a big vote on whether they should officially support reparations discussions for slavery and acknowledge its long-term harm. Cool. But why only the transatlantic slave trade? What about Korea's slavery? The Arab-Muslim trans-Saharan slave trade? No. The Red Sea slave trade, which lasted centuries. These were one of the longest slave trades. No talks? What about the internal African slavery? No reparations there? No? And let's not forget modern day slavery happening right now. Still nothing? Oh, and those African merchants who sold their own people. No reparations? White slaves? No? If we're going to have reparations talks for slavery, shouldn't we at least look at slavery worldwide?
Gathering in the name of remembrance and reparations to back a draft resolution recognising the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity.
There's no such thing as a slave. There were human beings who were trafficked and then enslaved by people who believed they could own those human beings as chattels.
The consequences of which, he says, still persist today, and accused the US of normalising the erasure of history.
Schools are being mandated to stop teaching students about the truth of slavery, segregation, and racism in American history courses.
Guys, here we go again. Here we go again with the endless chant of reparations, reparations, reparations. The United Nations, that organization that has long since outlived its utility, that bloated, useless talking shop that accomplishes nothing tangible except burning through taxpayer dollars, just passed a resolution spearheaded by Ghana. It declares the transatlantic slave trade the gravest crime against humanity. It is not that I necessarily disagree with that. I mean, it is true. It is one of the gravest crimes against humanity. But my problem is that they are pushing the Western countries to apologize, to pay up, and to fund some vague reparatory justice pot. 123 countries voted yes, but the US, Israel, and Argentina said no. Most of Europe abstained. Surprise, surprise, only the West is expected to cough up the cash. No one is taxing modern African nations, Arab states, or anyone else. Why? Because this thing has nothing to do with justice, guys. This is just a shakedown, a global hustle pretending to be an act of morality. First of all, who exactly is supposed to pay these reparations and who is supposed to receive this money, guys? Well, according to the United Nations, the people footing the bill should be the modern Western nations, many of whose ancestors never owned slaves, whose ancestors arrived long after the end of slavery, or whom even fought to abolish it. In America, millions of white people descend from post-Civil War immigrants, poor Europeans or Union soldiers who died fighting to end slavery. Even if there was any white people who engaged in slavery today, every single one of them are dead. Down to their third generation, they are dead, wiped off. No single white person alive today ever owned slaves. And none of them ever took part in slavery. The recipients who are going to get the money are people who have never ever been enslaved for one single day. Not a single day have they been enslaved in their lives. Very few of their ancestors suffered historically as slaves. Yes, very few. But so did millions of other people who were enslaved throughout history. Tell me that this isn't pushing innocent people to pay for the sins of others who are dead just to enrich others who share distant ancestry to others who are dead. It doesn't make sense. As the old saying goes, you cannot inherit guilt like you inherit a trust fund. No living person bears collective racial guilt for events that happened centuries ago. This is nothing but anti-individualistic madness, the exact opposite of Western principles that promotes personal responsibility and the rule of law. What makes me even more mad is that Ghana is leading the charge, spearheading a resolution that is demanding reparations from the West. The sheer audacity of these Ghanaian politicians is breathtaking. These are the same people whose ancestors in the Ashanti Empire built their power and wealth on the sweat and the blood and the chains of their fellow African people. Long before the first European slave ship ever docked in the Gold Coast, slavery was already a deeply entrenched thing into the institution in the Ashanti society. Slavery was viewed as natural, time-honored, and even sanctioned by their gods. The Ashanti waged relentless wars not just for territory, but to capture human beings, their own brothers and sisters, who were then used as domestic laborers, farm workers, and gold miners, and many of them sold into the transatlantic slave trade. They did not stumble into it. They actively participated in it. They supplied captives to Portuguese, Dutch, British, and other European traders at ports like Elmina Port. They traded slaves for guns, for gunpowder, for goods that allowed them to conquer more neighboring places, capture more people, and even sell more slaves. It was a vicious cycle they embraced for profit and for power. The Ashanti Empire became one of the largest slave-owning and slave-trading states in West Africa during that era. And what about the internal slavery? Slaves in Ashanti were chained in markets, exposed to the sun, flogged, starved, and in some cases sacrificed to their gods for the rituals. Male slaves often faced harsher treatment than the female ones, okay? This was not some, mild domestic arrangement, guys. It was a brutal, institutionalized human exploitation that predated and enabled the European trade. Yet today, modern Ghanaian leaders like this man we see here are standing tall with zero shame, pointing fingers at only the West. They never sent a single boat to rescue their captured kin. They never apologized to the descendants of the people they sold. They never offered reparations to the millions that were shipped across the Atlantic like cargo. They simply handed their brothers and sisters over to the Portuguese, over to the British, to the Americans, to whomever paid the best price, and they pocketed the profits. Now they have the audacity and the nerve to demand money from the very nations whose ancestors eventually ended the slave trade, fought civil wars to abolish slavery, and build societies where descendants of the enslaved people have unprecedented opportunities. Meanwhile, Ghana and much of West Africa still grapple with modern forms of slavery and exploitation today. This is historical hypocrisy at its finest, okay? It is just historical hypocrisy on steroids. Selective amnesia covered up in grievance politics. The sellers want reparations from the buyers. Give me a break. If we are opening the books on slavery, then guys, let us open them all the way, okay? Let us talk about everything. Ghana and the Ashanti owe a debt to their own people. First, they have to start there. The West apologized. They abolished it and then they moved forward. When will Ghana confront its own past with the same honesty? Guys, let us also remember that slavery was not just a white invention, okay? It was a human invention. It was universal. Africans sold Africans by the millions. European traders did not raid the interior themselves. They bought captives from African kingdoms and middlemen who waged wars specifically to generate slaves for profit. Kingdoms like Dahomey, the Ashanti Kingdom, and others built empires on raiding and selling their brothers and sisters. Without African willingness, without willing African sellers, the scale of the transatlantic slave trade wouldn't have happened. And let's not forget the Arab-Muslim slave trade, which lasted longer, enslaved more Africans in some estimates, and was even far more brutal. Black male slaves were routinely castrated to serve as eunuchs, a mutilation that killed most and prevented reproduction. What could be more horrible than that, guys? What could be more insidious than that? Women were funneled into concubinage and harems. Let's also talk about the other type of slavery. The word slave comes from Slav, because Europeans, that is the Slavic people, were enslaved by Arabs for centuries. Who pays reparation to their descendants? Who is going to pay reparations to the white Europeans enslaved by the Barbary pirates? Another hard nut for you to crack. Even in the American colonies, the first legal slave owner was not some cartoon villain in a white hood. It was a black man, Anthony Johnson, a free black man who came from Angola, who arrived in Virginia as an indentured servant, gained freedom, acquired land, and then he successfully sued in court to keep another black man, John Casor, as a slave for life. That's right. The legal precedent for lifelong chattel slavery in the English colonies came from a black man owning another black man for life. History doesn't fit the neat, evil whitey narrative, so that is why it is memory hold. And besides, like I said before, the West have already atoned repeatedly. Western nations ended the slave trade, like I said, okay? So what did Africans do? They tried to stop the end of slavery until the West had to retaliate and fight them with warships and ammunitions. Okay, over 600,000 Americans died fighting this war. In addition to that, the West passed the abolition laws, issued public apologies, implemented civil rights legislations, granted affirmative action, trillions in welfare transfers, and built societies where descendants of the same slaves have opportunities unmatched anywhere in Africa today. No other civilization that practiced slavery has done half or even quarter of what the West has done. African nations are silent. They did not even offer an apology. Arab nations, they still have modern slavery going on today. So if we are really serious about reparations, why the selective outrage? Why are we not making demands from any of these African countries who captured and sold fellow Africans? Okay, why are we also ignoring the role the Arabs played in enslaving and castrating and erasing generations? Why pretend that only the nations that abolished slavery and spread Enlightenment values are the ones who owed a debt? The UN's hypocrisy is staggering, guys. This organization cannot even stop wars. They cannot even feed the hungry without massive waste or enforce basic human rights. But they sure love to lecture the West while exempting the rest of the world. It is a club where dictators and kleptocrats vote to extract money from productive democracies and claim to be handing out reparations to people. The transatlantic slave trade was evil, yes. All slavery is evil, but selective historical accounting to tax only the Western nations, it is not an act of justice. The United Nations should just stick to its failures and leave productive nations alone. No more reparations grift, guys. No more racial guilt trips. Time to move forward as free individuals, not perpetual debtors and perpetual creditors based on skin color. But as always, guys, these are my thoughts and my opinions. Please feel free to share yours in the comment section below, but do so respectfully. Also, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, honestly, I don't know what you're waiting for. Subscribe to the channel. Like and share this video to keep people informed, and consider joining my membership or supporting the channel in any way that you can. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to catch you on the next one. For now, peace.